get questions answered about how to improve their business, as well as gain things such as financial advice and ways for them to maybe get grants or loans for their business. So I highly recommend checking out Open Trellis. They've been a great resource. And then Labormed's digital marketing agency. That's my business partner and I's digital marketing agency here in Richmond. We work with businesses all around the United States. And then Honor Loan, they support helping entrepreneurs get loans for their business. And of course, VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, located here in Richmond. 1 Million Cups mission. So we want to serve 1 million cups of coffee, right? So the barrier to access education, resources, and connection for all types of new and aspiring entrepreneurs throughout the United States. This is an open platform for anyone to come and speak who's an entrepreneur and has a business that they would like to share, especially if there is something that is a challenge that they want to open up to the audience and get their insights, advice, and ask questions about. So 1 Million Cups is an organization that's been here for, this is their 6th year. And there's now 150 communities nationwide, an estimated 1,000 organizers, and there's about 12,000 entrepreneurs impacted each month. These are presentations, they are not pitches, so they're not really sales pitches. The authentic connections piece of it is this is truly a networking opportunity. I mentioned kind of before we got started here, I've met my business partner through this organization. We've gained vendors from this organization, and we've gained customers from this organization as well. So it really is a great place to network. I've learned about a lot of different community events going on, found new people to meet and places to go related to community and cultural events. So it's been fantastic. And there's been a lot of other people that I know who've attended 1 Million Cups who have also either formed friendships or some kind of business connection through the organization. And then so there are attendees around the world. For example, our chapter is in Richmond, but our speaker today is from Detroit. So there's 113,000 people attend 1 Million Cups events, and 67% of attendees report attending 1 Million Cups events to the community engagement aspect. So that's why they come. And then 64% report attending to connect with entrepreneurs and learn from others. This is our region. So we are in the Southeast region, and you can see here, this is all the various locations that we have. And we have several in Virginia alone. And this is our primary leadership team. So we help organize these events. Dale Fickett, our fearless leader, unfortunately this semester, so he's also teaching entrepreneurship courses at University of Richmond. And this semester he has class during this time period. So John Brew and I are the primary hosts for this semester. And then Elizabeth Romero, she helps with translating some of our presentations into Spanish. And Ian Young is our MC and tech guru who helps us keep everything organized and make sure that these presentations run smoothly. And again, we like to stress this is not a pitch. It's not an investor pitch or a sales pitch. This is to have people understand where you're headed, what your challenges are, and what your goals are as an entrepreneur. So if you know anyone that has a business of their own that they'd like to come and present on, usually they're within their first 5 years of starting a business and are looking to grow. Maybe they need resources for something. Maybe they've got an internal operations challenge that they're trying to overcome, and they'd like to open it up to the audience and kind of talk about it. So it's a really good place it's more of a brainstorming session and a sharing of ideas session than it is so much of a traditional pitch. And please, if you're interested or you know someone that might be interested, if they can go to 1millioncups.com/Richmond to apply. And then you can follow us on various different platforms. We have a Twitter, Instagram, the website, of course, and then Facebook and LinkedIn profile. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Camille from Cooperative Capital. I'll let Camille go into the details about what Cooperative Capital does, because there's a few different things. but it's a pretty amazing organization, and they're kind of transforming their area. So I'm very excited to hear from Camille. So thank you again for taking the time today, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. I'm Camille Johnson. I am the CEO of Cooperative Capital. And today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about who we are, what we're doing, some of the current challenges or things that we're trying to work out about our business model, and how you guys can get involved with us if you're interested. So to start, what we do, in the most simplest sense, what we do is we help people connect with their neighbors and use community capital to drive equitable community and economic development in their communities. We're interested in helping communities and folks connect with like-minded folks in their communities and across the country. We want to help them learn about community capital, community investment, equitable community and economic development. We want to help them organize and engage fellow residents in their community, learn about best practices being used in similar communities across the US, and then pull their capital and invest in their communities. Our current partners are the Ford Foundation, the Eastside Community Network, which is a local CBO in Detroit, and the National Coalition for Community Capital. And later this year, we'll be partnering with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation as well on some of this work. So as far as our why, what we're really interested in is providing a feasible way for folks to combat inequitable development practices in their cities and communities, while also creating collective wealth building opportunities for folks. A really good way to kind of center this is by looking at who develops our communities. We're based in Detroit. This is where our pilot is focused. So this data is Detroit centered. But something that we talk about repeatedly when we're working with communities and when we're talking to funders is kind of the lopsided nature of development in our city. So since the city and on period, and this is something that happens across the country, by and large, the folks that receive large amounts of tax incentives and dollars earmarked for development are folks that are not from communities. In Detroit itself, over the past 10 years, we've seen almost $1 billion in funds go to the Ford Motor Company, Fiat Chrysler, Bedrock/Rock Ventures, which is owned by Dan Gilbert and what is now Rocket Mortgage, and Illich Holdings, which is the family behind Little Caesars Pizza. These funds have focused almost exclusively on downtown Detroit, with a bit of focus in Midtown, which is like just north of that area, and some areas that again are just abutting this area. But these developments are things like Little Caesars Arena, which is the new Pistons and Red Wings Stadium. It's one of the 150 towers that Dan Gilbert owns downtown. It's huge plants in our communities that actually increase pollution. None of these things are housing. None of them are funding small businesses. None of this development is really touching residents in the city. We know that during the Obama era, opportunity zones legislation was created, and the idea behind it was that it would, spur economic development in communities that needed it most and communities that were hardest hit, right? And it was going to be awarded to development projects that were inaccessible to residents. However, the legislation allowed states to decide what opportunity zones were in given cities and what that kind of geographic imprint looks like. And by and large, in many states, folks just chose entire cities, and Michigan is one of those states. So in Michigan, rather than saying, these are the area codes or precincts or however you want to break it down in the city of Detroit or in Wayne County that actually need opportunity zone funding, we just earmarked the entire city of Detroit as an opportunity zone, which meant that the same folks, for the most part, ended up receiving these funds that were receiving tax incentives. So Bedrock, again, received a lion's share of that funding. The platform, which is a developer that's similar to Bedrock, and Genosco Development, which is again similar to the platform in Bedrock, received hundreds of millions of dollars in opportunity zone funding. And that funding went where? Mainly in downtown Detroit, a bit into Midtown, and some of the super neighboring areas again, which meant that we were still seeing lopsided development in the city. It's really exacerbated our housing crisis in terms of access to affordable housing, because oftentimes what you're seeing is these funds being used to take traditional multi-family properties, completely renovate them, but then hike up the rates by, almost 150%. and really push residents out of neighborhoods without access to new housing. We've seen it change the face of small business ownership in these neighborhoods when you're able to raise rent prices or when you're able to find other reasons to push longstanding businesses out of this community and bring folks in that not only may not have traditional ties to the community, but also aren't providing resources and services that are actually desired by residents that live there and that are also accessible to them either by price point or even physical location. So what we're seeking to do with Cooperative Capital is really help folks use community capital solutions to kind of turn the tides and promote equitable development in their communities. Go back. So what is community capital? It's super simple. It's just the concept that it's money that comes from the community and goes back into the community. It's like how taxes should work, but like they don't work that way. So think of it like actual taxes, right? And currently within federal law, there are 4 ways that you can kind of use community capital solutions to promote investment and equitable development amongst folks that are non-accredited investors. That's anyone that has a net worth of less than $250,000 or makes less than that amount per year, which is pretty groundbreaking because that means that you're able to have regular folks come together and really invest in something. There are investment clubs, which have a maximum of 100 members that all have to have known each other for a significant amount of time. That's a way that you can collectively invest. There's equity crowdfunding, which is usually used by businesses that are seeking to raise capital in a non-traditional way. There's community land trust, a super cool concept that requires a lot of buy-in from local government, state government, and a bunch of moving pieces, but when executed correctly can be used to really kind of maintain affordable neighborhoods. A really good example is Dudley Street in Boston. And then finally, there are community investment funds. Under current legislation, you can't just have like a community investment fund that invests in anything. There are 4 different types. There's a diversified business fund, which allows folks to invest in businesses as long as they don't have a majority share of ownership. So you can't go above 50%. There's a real estate realization fund, which usually requires at least one real estate industry professional, which allows folks to pull their funds and acquire, rehab, and then either hold or lease and sell property. There's charitable loan funds. You're required to be a 501c3, but it allows you to loan fund under very friendly terms to small businesses or any type of investment opportunity in your community. And then there's charitable equity funds, which again, you have to be a 501c3, but instead you actually have equity in whatever that investment is. Again, usually with very favorable terms and again, focus usually on community. Our model is focused on using community capital solutions or helping folks in 2 ways. First, we want to provide direct support to residents that are interested in collectively investing, following generally a 3-step process. The first is organizing and educating. We work with community stakeholders to organize and educate residents that are interested in these concepts over a series of months to ensure that they're adequately prepared to understand both what the different options are, what the risks are, and how they can be used to like achieve their collective vision. Once they've gone through that period of organizing and educating, we'll help them create that investment vehicle. That will look like connecting them with the proper types of professionals that they need in order to successfully actually create these groups. So they're going to need to talk to someone that has a special knowledge of securities law. They're going to need to talk to someone that has a special knowledge of how to manage these different types of investment vehicles. And then someone that also has knowledge on how they can actually successfully be executed and what things like, structuring the board or leadership looks like and how they need to go about handling all these processes so that it's all together from the outset. And then once that investment vehicle is created, supporting these groups to actually make that first investment. And so again, that can be connecting them with the right types of folks to help them do due diligence on an opportunity, supporting them to do research to see if there's something that aligns, or really working with them to kind of eke out just, the A, B, and C's of what they need to do to get that moving forward. In addition to our direct support, we're also developing a tech platform. The goal of this tech platform is to really be like a living, breathing cooperative capital community online where folks are able to do 2 things. For residents that have actually created investment groups or investment vehicles, they'll be able to manage their affairs on that platform in one private space. They'll be able to see how their investments are doing, talk to each other, share resources, work collaboratively in one, private kind of focused space. Secondly, there will be kind of like an open source, almost, social community where anyone that's part of this cooperative capital network and signs up can come and connect with folks that are interested in community capital, that are, any time of the pipeline. So you may be a complete newbie, you may already be part of some group in your city, you may be a leader in a certain area of the industry, but come there, connect with folks, share best practices and lessons learned, talk about what's going on in your communities, and even begin to organize with folks as you start to see people that are from your community that are on the platform. In addition to that social cohesive aspect, we'll also be providing educational resources and toolkits that will help residents kickstart things in their communities. So for instance, there will be a how-to on how you can start organizing folks and how you can start conversations in your community. Here's how you can start a workshop or a town hall. But all of this having the goal of really ensuring that people have resources, because this stuff is out here. It's not something that's new. The National Coalition for Community Capital and this group Local Cap have done a ton of work actually pulling together all the information on how you can get these solutions done, talking to folks that have actually successfully executed different aspects of this in different cities, but there's kind of like a vacuum. So, or not a vacuum, but a closed loop. So unless you already know about this, you're probably not going to know about NC3. You're not going to know that they have all of these tools. You're not going to know about all of the different professionals out here that are doing these things. And so we really want to take all of these conversations that we see happening in other spaces and bring them into one space with folks that really need to hear this information the most, which is the folks that we want to really be taking, these solutions and executing them in their communities. As far as our greatest challenge right now, the question is, how do we scale responsibly? Firstly, given the securities and financial considerations involved in using these community capital solutions, we need to make sure that whatever final products that we have is legally and ethically sound. We don't want to sit up here and say, hey, we're going to help you guys figure out this thing. And then they create whatever vehicle and it's a mess and they have all of these issues going forward. And it isn't what they were promised, right? It's like a loan to an online college. We want to make sure that what we're creating actually allows people to do what they need to do in a way that is simple, in a way that is straightforward, in a way that anticipates any barriers that they may have, so that what we're creating is lasting change. Secondly, what we also want to ensure is that we don't have a product that encourages bad actors. So our model has undergone a ton of changes. I mean, when we first started Cooperative Capital back in 2016, we were leaning on a completely different piece of legislation that was really Michigan focused, and that didn't really have an actual mechanism to execute it. And so we had to retool and reframe. And then we came back and we were like, okay, well, what if we actually did it from a more grassroots way where people come, they connect with each other, and then we just help them figure out what they want to do. But it was like, well, if it just seems like it's kind of like, a free for all, anyone can sign up for Planet Fitness. What if you have folks that come in and they actually are not interested in the concept, or they're not interested in doing this the right way? So how do we ensure that through this process, we're really getting folks that are seeking to take advantage of this in a good way? And in addition to that, there are just some other questions that we need to answer practically. What is our price point? How do we package and distribute our products? And how many customers can we manage at once? Because this is something that is so people-centered. For some of the community capital solutions, legally, you do have a requirement. For instance, for an investment club, you have to have known each other for at least 90 days. But what does knowing each other really mean? There's not a specific description of that, but you can assume, it's like, are 3 meetings sufficient? Are 4 meetings sufficient? Do we need to make sure that people are actually coming in and building relationships? How do we codify that? What does that look like? And so what we're in the process of doing right now is piloting our direct support model. This year, we received funding from the Ford Foundation, and we will be receiving funding from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to work with the Eastside Community Network and a few other organizations in Detroit to, right now, I think we're thinking of it as like a cohort-based model, but basically to take residents through this process. So starting from that organize and educate piece and taking them all the way through to making their first investment. Which will allow us to do a few things. Firstly, it'll allow us to actually see how feasible this model is with our most difficult use case, which is folks that live in low-income communities, that have fixed income, that don't necessarily have a lot of resources, that may live in neighborhoods that don't get traditional eyes looked on them as far as investment, but that we know are very involved, that we know are already super organized or already doing other things to really get this going, to see how we can effectively do this. At the end of our pilot, we hope to have at least an initial iteration of kind of a prepackaged this probably isn't the final name, but like a community capital startup product that we can really provide to folks, that is replicable enough that we don't have to create, something over and over again for every group, but that also leaves enough space to take into consideration different, local, eccentricities. So this will very clearly probably be applicable across the city of Detroit, right? But the city of Richmond is going to have different laws that will impact things such as, is it feasible for someone to do a community land trust and something that we can fold in here? Are there different considerations as far as, investing in real estate or in business in that city? And so again, really making sure that we have a product that is considering all of these different things, because while we're starting in Detroit, this is something that will be national. And we want to make sure that we have something that kind of spans that gamut. And I guess also I should back up to say, or I don't have to back up to say this, because it relates to the next piece, which is we're also using this funding to build out the tech platform that I mentioned, with the goal of beta testing that in fall 2022. And we're really excited about this because part of how we landed on this current type of model is through a ton of focus groups and one-on-one interviews that we did last year with folks that originally signed up with interest in Cooperative Capital. And these individuals were from Seattle, Fort Lauderdale, El Paso, Colorado, Utah, Hudson Valley, New York, Virginia, all over. They had different racial and ethnic backgrounds, gender identities, ages. But one thing that really, really resonated across all of these backgrounds, economic status, education, careers, whatever, was that people were really interested in a way to meaningfully connect with folks in their community, to use whatever privilege that they may have to really try to spread resources across their community, and to really come together and create something that was lasting and that could be continued to be used by residents, whether they stayed there or not. And also to have meaningful ways to just connect with folks doing work. We learned about someone that was doing degentrification work in Seattle. I never even heard of degentrification. I didn't know that was a thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? But that's something that people need to know about. And so we're really, really excited this year to be able to really start putting this work into practice. We're really excited about testing this platform, and getting closer to being able to share these resources with everyone. And so I have this at the end of the slide too, but one of the ways that you guys can get involved or can help or, learn more about us is just to go to our website and sign up. Because by doing that, you'll join kind of like our Cooperative Capital network. And once we're ready to start beta testing the platform, you'll receive alerts that you can sign up and get in there as we begin to do more kind of educational events, which we're hoping to do later this year. Likely virtually, because who knows what's going on. And just because it's also a really easy way to connect folks across the country, right? But that'll be an easy way for you guys to plug in and connect with us. And with that, I'm done.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Camille. Great job. There's a lot that Cooperative Capital is trying to, or is tackling. And it is big and it's heavily regulated, right? I'm sure you're working on a lot of those kinds of things. So I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it's one of those like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back every single time. And I do have to kind of kick us off. Please, if you have questions and you don't want to forget them, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat or write them down and kind of raise your hand. But I do have a question. Can you kind of go into some examples or a little bit of clarification around what Cooperative Capital does do versus what Cooperative Capital would not do, that someone might assume Cooperative Capital does, but you're like, no, you have to go through someone else for that.
Yes. So the number one question I get asked are people are like, oh, so you help people make worker cooperatives, right? And I'm like, I can get why you would think that. But no, that is not what we do. We're not necessarily focused on traditional, housing cooperatives. However, down the line, what we would like to be able to do is provide direct support in those ways. Right now, we're just specifically focused on community capital-based solutions, mainly because when we first came up with the idea, it was that we would be, running and creating funds. And so rather than helping other folks organize themselves to do what they're going to do, we were saying we're going to lean on this act, which allows you to, create huge funds with non-accredited investors and organize it yourselves. That did not work out because while the law was passed, it was not accompanied by actual, mechanisms that say, here's how you can do this, which means that we kept having a back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with Michigan Securities to say, okay, well, how do you guys suggest that we try to execute this? And so that, I guess that would be the second thing that we do not do. We are not going into communities and saying that we're going to create a community fund. We're not going into communities and saying that we're going to, lead or manage or steward any of that. What we really see ourselves as is like consulting, basically. So we're coming in, we're saying, we understand that, this community seems to have, so I should back up as well, because something that we are doing too is creating kind of like a checklist or a rubric by which communities can kind of look to see whether or not they're kind of at a space where they're ready for a community capital type of solution. So considerations that you would take into hand are obviously, what can you do legally in your state? Do they have laws that allow you to execute this and the third? Okay, boom, great. Now, in terms of kind of like what's happening in your community, is there a ton of economic development? Are there opportunities to pursue, land ownership or businesses that you can invest in? How involved are residents currently in the community? Do you have a bunch of folks that are, already doing community development projects on a smaller scale, or that are involved in different planning processes or going through different fellowships to learn leadership and capacity building? Because all of those things are going to be super important to understanding kind of where you are on that step in the instance that you're someone that kind of wants to, come and say, I want to kind of get started before we would come through Cooperative Capital.
So Cooperative Capital is a little more of when the tech platform is available and it's open for everyone to use, it's more of a vetting process for people who, or organizations that have an opportunity to say, we're accepting investments in whatever our opportunity is over here, whether we are building homes or we're a local business or whatever the organization is itself, or maybe we manage finances in some way, I'm not sure, but we're accepting investments. And your Cooperative Capital is looking at those organizations saying, well, legally, what is allowed in your area for these things in the first place? Okay, we'll allow you to be on this platform to say that you're accepting investments, and then we'll connect people in. No. Okay.
No. So that is something in the long term, we do want to have an additional part of our platform that will connect folks with investment opportunities. But what we're saying is that, are you someone that, lives in the Palmer or the East English Village neighborhood of Detroit, and you're interested in, you and your friends in your block club are interested in buying that vacant lot on the end of your block and turning it into a community garden or a pocket park, or maybe, building a home on it and then renting it out, whatever it is that you want to do. What we're going to do is, first of all, give you access to this platform where you can talk to other folks that are doing projects similar to this, or that are just involved in their communities and that are really interested in kind of, like collective building together. You'll be able to access resources and modules where you can learn some of the basics. You'll be able to start seeing who else in your community is doing stuff. And then you'll also be able to kind of, assess where you think that you are on that timeline. Ideally, what will happen at the end of our pilot of the direct support piece is that, along with the tech platform, what we'll also have is kind of like a packaged consulting or whatever products that folks can then purchase or come into as a group, where they can say, okay, we know that we're here, or maybe, we want to, access more folks, but we know that we've reached this point and now we want your support to actually execute this.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan, to your question, so no, we are not a 501c3. We are a for-profit company. However, we're in the process of starting a 501c3 arm community capital, which will be where some of our social impact work will live, because what we also want to be able to do going forward, and what we see the opportunity to do, is kind of like a two-pronged thing. Like, there are folks that are going to be able to come and say, we actually just want to pay for this service and have you guys support us to do this, right? We probably already have some type of group or an idea of where we want to go. But then there are going to be residents and communities like the one that we're piloting that are not going to have, the funds to necessarily say, we want to start for this from the outset, or maybe they won't have the capacity yet. And so what we're thinking that we're going to do there is something that's going to look more like a fellowship or a cohort model, where we partner with a CBO or any other, nonprofit in a given community. and they identify residents that they want to go through the same process, right? But instead of it being paid for by them, will be subsidized by grants, like what we're doing right now.
All right. And Roy, I see you have a question here.
Hi, Camille. Thank you for your presentation. I was trying to listen to everything, and I'm glad, Ian, you brought up those questions about kind of conceptualizing what it is. Can you clarify who your primary user is versus the goals down the line? So, I mean, I'll just get my questions out right here. So some of the questions I have is that first one is, you talk about the community startup kind of package, and then you said that the tech model, of those two, which one is the one priority? Mm-hmm. That's one question. But then the second question was, you noticed or you identified that a lot of the funds go to those major companies. Mm-hmm. Is your user, or could a potential user of your platforms, whichever one you decide is important, be kind of like a bridge between those organizations and connecting them to the community and showing them how to do that as a model, versus going into each city trying to drum up who's ever interested in navigating all those different spaces? I only say that because it's a little bit unclear what problem you're solving on that. But there's a clear problem already with those major companies coming in and taking up space. And that one almost seems like a low-hanging fruit. And then that could possibly dictate what you do in the future.
Yeah, sure. I'll answer your last question first. So the issue is not that they don't know what to do or that they're coming in. The issue is that there's a practice amongst government and corporations of providing development funds to specific individuals and having a closed loop. Right now, they do know how they could invest in these communities. They don't, which is why you're seeing like a national housing crisis, where by and large, the real estate development industry has colluded together to make housing all but unaffordable, even though they know that these things are out here. And so what we're saying is that there are folks, so for every single like tax incentive that goes out, you also have like foundations and corporations that are creating like opportunities for residents to do like planning processes where you can come in and say, I have an idea for community development. I have an idea for economic development. And you give them all the capacity and take them through the entire process to develop an implementation plan for, you know, maybe some low-cost condos or a new use development on their commercial corridor or what have you. But they make those plans, that process ends, and now it's like, how do I fund that? I can't get traditional financing from banks. I'm not going to be able to get financing from some of these other opportunities that come up. Like in the city of Detroit, we have something called Motor City Match, where you can compete to get some funding to get put into a renovated commercial building and get paired with someone. But there's a ton of nepotism and quid pro quo that goes into that, and just things that happen in bureaucracy that make it so that folks that really need those funds and resources aren't getting them. The way that we look at community capital is that what it's allowing everyday residents to do is say that we can pull our funds and create new creative capital stacks to invest in homegrown ideas. So it may be that you have a resident group that already has an idea, and what they want to do is come together and create a real estate realization fund so that they can pull their funds and go buy a commercial strip, redo it, and then lease it out affordably. That's something that a group in the Twin Cities Northeast Cooperative has done. You might have a group of residents that are saying, actually, we don't necessarily want to do something ourselves, but we want to be able to invest in ideas as they come along. You know, Pauletta down the street wants to be able to redo this house and then rent it out to folks as two-family flat. And so now what we can help them do is to come together. Maybe they just need an investment club. And so they come together and now they're able to decide what things they want to invest in their communities. The same thing for, investing in small businesses. Maybe that Harry's Barber Shop is about to lose their building, that they just need a little bit more investment to really zhuzh up that business. And you say, okay, we're going to come together and we are going to provide that capital that is missing in our community, or that is purposely missing in our community, right? Because it's not being focused on things that residents are saying that they need or that they desire. And it's also allowing them to kind of take control of what the community planning process looks like. I can speak for Detroit and, maybe like New Orleans is another city that's relevant, or Chicago, but oftentimes when you think about how a lot of cities now do their planning, they don't come to neighborhoods and say, hey, what do you guys want to see here? What do you need to see here? They come in and say, hey, y'all, we decided that we're going to throw up these types of restaurants, this type of this type of that. And now we're going out and fundraising to do this. We're not even taking your input into it. And you'll just see what happens when it's done. And so providing folks that are frustrated with that process, that are frustrated with trying to get their voices heard in other ways, and know that together they can do certain things. So think about, like, I always like to use the concept of like rent parties. Like, people can come together and say, all right, you know what, such and such needs to get their rent paid. We're going to have this party. We're going to come there. We're going to have a good time. And that's an example of folks that maybe don't have a ton of disposable income, right? Or a ton of just, slush funds coming together to say that if we work together, we can make something happen. And so taking that idea and really anchoring it in something larger.
Can I just say one more thing? Because something just clicked when you were saying that. And it finally, I was like, oh, okay, I think, would it be possible? Is it the tech platform? I'm sorry if I'm getting a little bit excited because it's kind of cool. Is it like crowdfunding, but for communities? Like when you have Kickstarter for original business, or, what is the excitement around there? Because that was the first thing that came into mind. Is like you said, if we all don't have anything, but we can model or market what's happening in your geographic area, and then everyone could put their money towards that one thing, and each month is updated in different cities. And it's almost like you're just creating the platform for that, but then also there's that extra toolkit that people can see how to get involved and then do their own. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So like ideally it's like folks can come on there and they can say, okay, so the degentrification folks in Seattle, they're doing some crazy stuff. I've never even heard of it, but they can come on there and say, okay, boom, it's degentrification in Seattle. Here's the actual members of our group. You can join, you can see what we're doing now. You can see what we're raising funds for. You can see, we can talk about how we went about our process of organizing. How do we approach different difficulties when it comes to working with municipal government? How have we, determined how to, like, they had landed on this idea to purchase a local theater and convert it into both commercial and residential mixed use space and create some creative capital stack to fund it and finance it in order to bring folks from the neighborhood back into it. And so creating a space where people can be having those conversations, where they can share their progress on what they're doing, where they can not solicit, right? Because first of all, you can't solicit nobody, that's illegal for securities reasons. But secondly, so that you can engage and connect with folks to say, okay, we're looking for people that are interested in supporting us, joining us, being down with the cause. We're willing to, maybe do some type of like lunch and learn with other folks from Richmond to teach you guys how you can do this here. And then in our own closed loop, like also have private spaces for them to also talk and manage things as well. So that it's not necessarily one or the other, because ideally what will happen is that when we beta test, we'll have kind of like that public, everyone coming together, almost like social, I don't want to call it like social media because it's not social media, but like chat room type thing, right? Platform, but then also work with the cohort that we're going to be teaching through our community partner to test the actual like private group management piece of it. Because what we also want to happen is that when you're in there, once you've created this group, right, you'll be able to have important documents in there. But to your point, you'll be able to say, here's what we're currently invested in, here's how our investment is doing, here's how our dollars are flowing, and be able to manage and track all of that stuff. And then in the long term, have a piece of it as well that, to your original questions, does say, okay, here's a current investment opportunity. Here's a business that's looking for some equity, that's doing equity crowd raising. Here's someone that has, this big development project. They have this, they need this amount of gap funding or what have you, and stuff of that nature. And so, to that point as well, something that we will actually be working on this year, likely with Pharmacy Foods, is testing out, because for investment clubs, community land trusts, and the community investment funds, the approach is pretty similar. But when you're doing equity crowdfunding, it's different because you're going to be starting with the business that's doing it instead of the residents that are seeking to come together. And so we'll be working with them to really kind of eke out what that piece looks like. There are a few business owners that we've talked to that have done equity crowdfunding with varying success. And so what we're really aiming to do there is really create kind of like an easy strategy that you can deploy to get it effectively done, which says, not only here are the things that you need to keep in mind legally when you're doing equity crowdfunding, which people can run into trouble with sometimes, but also if you want to really actually make this something that's effective, here is the best way to go about getting folks to actually invest in this crowdfund, and to make it something that you can do going forward to make it super successful. Because there's like this group out of Western Michigan. They're a local brewery started by two friends. They opened the first iteration through crowdfunding. It was so successful that they opened up a second raised a ton of funds, were able to expand, paid all those folks back because they were so successful, opened up a third raise, did it again, and it's been really effective. But that's partly because of the way that they were able to harness like the support from their community and really do effective storytelling. So we'll be working on that as well.
Well, I see Ian in here. Okay, I see Ian. It looks like Ian has to run, so I'll do at the end the PSAs, make sure to save some time. Thank you very much. And I do have a question about, you mentioned price point. So who will this be a pay to play from the community members, or will it be a pay to play for the businesses that are advertising, or I'm not soliciting, right, but showing that these are opportunities to be investing in? Or maybe it's both, I'm not sure.
So in terms of ads, I'm not sure how that's going to work. In terms of price point, what we're really thinking about is that like direct support consulting service, or whatever that package is, that product. How do we price it? Do we tier it? Because to circle back to another question that you had, Roy, who are our user types? So through our focus groups, we landed on at least 3 user types. The first is going to be super disinterested, upstarted millennials. Millennials are active in everything. We just want to do stuff. We want to make a difference. Now we're ready to take it from social media to real life. Probably have a little bit more options or income now. And so we're trying to figure out how we can do things and how we can do them differently, right? Like, let's not just buy a house. Let's do something cool with these investments. To that point. And then like some Gen Zers, but not really. The second people that we're eyeing are, what do we call them? Like seasoned or like comfortable professionals. These are going to be folks that are like Gen X, some boomers, but people that, again, or maybe they're from this city. They love talking about, they remember they were growing up and there were the tree-lined streets and the da-da-da whatever. But again, they are interested in making a difference. They don't necessarily need to see any financial impact from it, but it's something that they can do and that they're interested in investing in. We also, the third group is really, really invested in kind of like power building residents. These are folks that you're going to catch at every single community meeting, that are super invested when it comes to civic engagement, that are all about being in their neighborhood association, that are known by face and name at their local bank, at their local CBO, that are really trying to transform the neighborhoods and trying to be upstarts even when they don't have resources. The first two, we see as having more funds and being the folks that are definitely going to be more interested in maybe being, because they're self-starters, interested in doing something themselves. So they may not need the cohort model, right? They're not going to need to go hand in hand. They also just have more disposable income than residents who are going to be in that last category, who one are probably going to be coming from much more of a community-based piece, but also are probably going to need a lot more capacity building and support to execute whatever their vision is. Because usually, or at least what we found when we talk to these different, groups of folks, you had the first two groups that are like, we want to invest in a brownstone together and, keep the rent controlled and affordable. Maybe we want to invest in a local store. We want to do something, but it's not necessarily a huge idea. Whereas what we find with these residents that are super empowered and that are super active is that what they're seeking to do is make a long-standing change. And so it becomes, how do we take this vacant space that's in this community and turn it into a safe park? Or how do we, do blank and do this? And, or, how do we take this senior home that burned down and try to revive it or zhuzh it up, and things that can get done. Like an example we have is that we were able to, one nonprofit that I work with 30 years ago, galvanize and organize their residents to basically invest in a commercial strip mall that was built about 2 miles from where I live. And although those shares didn't actually convert into money due to securities law in Michigan, thousands of residents came out and pulled their funds to provide the investment and gap funding that was needed to really get that project off of the ground. And so those folks also aren't necessarily seeking to make a huge personal gain. The question becomes, how do we create a longer lasting gain that's for the whole community? And I mean, that 30 years later, that strip mall is still there. It's one of the most highly used ones here. It has a ton of resources. And so with the price point, less so towards that, the question there is, how do we continue sustaining that piece, both through grant funding and then, I mean, ideally revenue. But thinking about our other groups, what is most reasonable? And that's taking into consideration the legal costs that are associated, the costs that are going to be associated with any financial advisors, any other like educational costs that we just need to build in. And then what does continued support look like? And so that price point piece speaks directly to kind of like that direct support service when we're helping someone develop that. As far as the platform, again, we've gone through a few models even in the last year. And so originally when we were thinking of the platform, it was like everyone's going to sign up through here. And then it's like you reach 100 people in your zip code. And now you guys can come together and do blank. And so the platform was going to be like a pay for play type thing. Now I feel less comfortable with that model. And so I'm thinking that the price point for that is going to be more so tied to, are you actually using this for like group management? So are you using this to hold documents and share information and manage your affairs? If you are, then there will be an associated cost. And again, that will probably end up being tiered out based on like a mix of like, data, how big is your group? If it's a 5, person investment club versus like a 100 person realization funds, that's going to have different implications. But that's something that we still need to kind of think through. I'm also not a tech girl per se, so I need to talk to someone about, in actuality, what does that look like in terms of managing that?
Yeah, I definitely want to get to some of the other questions that have popped in here, especially from Dan. But if I would advise talking to someone that is and we might be able to help answer some of these kinds of questions from our team, because we've kind of had to go through something similar. Because we're building a tech platform ourselves. We're building a software for digital marketing, and looking at the costs involved with the cloud storage, essentially, and data transport, because it can rack up pretty quick. So looking at what that really looks like from an expense view, and just going, okay, well, how much are we willing to, depending on what our funds are, can we operate at a loss and for how long, versus do we immediately need to be breaking even or making a profit? And I'm not sure what that situation looks like for you specifically, but I definitely want to get to Dan's questions. Dan, please go ahead.
My concern is what happens to these people that you're funding early with a lot of different investors, and now they're successful and they want to go to, someplace on Sand Hill Road and get big dollars, and now they can't because they've got an asset table that's a mile long.
I don't understand how you mean. I guess we're not saying that we're seeking to get people funded with super big investors. What we're saying is that it's much more small, and we're also not funding people personally. I'm confused.
Right. No, I understand, but I'm saying that if 100 people come together to buy a building, mm-hmm. and they do a great job, and now they want to do 10 buildings, and they can't do it now with those 100 people, so they go someplace to look for capital. Okay, and one of the things that equity investors look at is the size of the asset table. How many people are they going to have to settle with in order to get the percentage they want out? Mm-hmm. So if you build these huge organizations of a lot of people in order to do these things, you may be hampering them somewhere else down the line.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that that is a good consideration of a barrier. I don't think that that changes the initial impacts. I think that our goal is to continue capacity building. There's a ton of resources right now for folks that have already gotten their foot in the door. I think that what we're seeing right now.
Okay, so sorry, Dan, you're in the middle of your question.
No, I think Camille addressed it satisfactorily at this point. I mean, I agree that you got to look near term before you can consider long term, but that has to be somewhere in your mind that that there may be a long term that you're putting the screws to.
Yeah, no, we are considering the long term, but again, we are seeking to continue partnering with folks that are already working on those pieces of the pipeline. So that what we're really creating is like continued resources and support.
Understood.
I've never been in a Zoom that got hacked before. Like I was hearing about them, but that has never happened to me.
I saw a ton of people coming in and I was like, oh, maybe it's like a time zone issue. I'll admit them. I'll let them in. Because I heard there were people that were waiting to subscribe to speak, to hear you speak. And so I was like, okay, all right, let them all in.
Maybe hungry for pickles.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, what's that video? And I was like, I think I've seen this on like the internet before. And then someone like spliced Dan's screen.
Yeah. So I'm sorry about that, but thank you for everyone staying pretty composed. And I do have some announcements for some local events here in the greater Richmond area. But before I run through those, I want to say thank you, Camille, for taking the time and presenting today. We really appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions, I'm not sure, have you already added your contact information in the chat over here? If you would like anyone to reach out to you in any way.
That now.
Okay, perfect. And I guess we'll add the same in here. Thank you, appreciate it. And if you have any other follow-up questions or you think you might be able to support Cooperative Capital's mission, please feel free to reach out to Camille. And Camille, if you have any questions related to what to maybe expect or questions to ask for the tech platform side, please let me know, because we've had to figure that out ourselves as we go along.
I definitely will.
You can run into all kinds of issues, especially if you're going to open it up to, how do we let people have discussions and how do we monitor that? What's behind the login wall versus what's not? So there's a lot of things to consider. And you've already been communicating with Dale Fickett. He's also a great reference for that because of what he's working on with Open Trellis. They're having to do the same types of things. And I actually think your model, in terms of technically what you're going to need, is actually much closer to Open Trellis. So Dale would be a really good resource for that because he's having to do almost the same type of technical build that you'll probably be looking at.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm gonna reach out to him too.
And let's see, I'll share my screen over here. All right, so there are a few events going on in the greater Richmond area. So there's a young professional meetup event, the Co-Laboratory of Virginia. So this is going to be this Thursday, the 24th, from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. And you can learn more at meetup.com/RVA Social Entrepreneurs. There we go. And then Center Street. So there's a pitch competition for Randolph-Macon Community College, Frank Day Field. So this is going to be again on Thursday. This is from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And this is through Dominion Innovation or Dominion Ovation Center Street pitch competition. There's a DEIC Accelerate Lunch and Learn on Monday, February 28th, so next Monday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. And this is also through Dominion Energy Innovation Center. And then Encorepreneurs, so this is Brace for Impact, the intersection of art and science and technology. This is going to be Thursday, March 3rd, so next Thursday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And you can learn more at encorepreneur.net. How to start your own business. So this is coming to us from SCORE, and this is going to be Thursday, March 10th from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And you can learn more at meetup.com/business owners of Richmond. And those are most of our community events. We only have a few more minutes if anyone wants to stay on. But does anyone have any other additional questions for Camille? If you have a few more minutes to stay on. All right. Well, thank you. And again, please, I would recommend reaching out to Dale and asking kind of what are they already going through, because they've probably tackled a lot of the questions that you all are probably thinking of that they've already had to do themselves for Open Trellis. And then anything else we might be able to provide some advice on as well. And in terms of the pricing, speaking with a few different consultants, I mean, Dan himself does consulting. So kind of getting a sense of what do people charge and for what is always good to try and find some comparisons there. Because anytime you're dealing with pricing, more than likely, whoever you're going to be talking to will be talking to some other consultants and getting their quotes on things. And so kind of knowing where you sit for your value propositions versus the price, knowing that everything is competitive. So what does it have to look like to make sense for you as well as the customer? But I know that's something you already know. But in general, that's typically whenever we're trying to figure out what is our pricing going to be like, we have to go out there and look at our competitors to say, well, are we offering apples to apples here, or are we offering something better for a lower price? And usually you have to be there or here in order to be competitive. Thank you so much. I loved hearing what's been going on with Cooperative Capital, and it seems like clearly they have a great leader in the CEO spot, and look forward to seeing what Cooperative Capital will be doing in the future.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Great presentation. Good luck.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.